Hello, darling. This is Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and you're listening to the Nightmare Junkhead Podcast. What?
Consciousness like a bad dream you can't wake from. This is the Nightmare Junkhead Podcast, a horror podcast that longs to one day wear a pencil-thin mustache. My name is Greg D.
I'm Genius McGee.
And on today's episode, we're delving even deeper into the mouth of March Madness as we welcome the Horrorversary podcast and Sledgehammer Horror to help us break down the remaining classics from our 1991 bracket. And whether or not you have sauntered into a detective's office, you can listen into our show. Simply search for Nightmare Junkhead wherever podcasts are played, hit subscribe, and when we drop our latest episode, it will download directly to your listening device of choice.
All up in your basket hole.
And of course, you can find us out on social media. We're on Twitter at Nightmare Junk and on Facebook at Nightmare Junkhead. And of course, it is on the Book of Face where we have an events tab which leads to
shenanigans and in the wall shenanigans.
And as this episode is releasing on Friday, March 12th, we do have events that are probably happening.
Yep, but since we're recording this early, we don't know what they are.
So make sure to keep track of all the shenanigans there. But more importantly, there on all social media, you're going to find our brackets. Because without the bracket,
how are you going to play the game? And remember, show your work.
Absolutely show your work. And we have shown our work in the previous round. Mm-hmm. So much so that we have said goodbye to 4 cult classics, 4 classics from, the last 30 years.
One of my theatrical spirit animals.
Indeed. But 1991 soldiers on. And as we go into the next round here, we are never by ourselves. Mm-mm. In fact, making a very welcome return here to the Mouth of March Madness is the host of a podcast that is literally kind of a celebration in everything that is the Mouth of March Madness. Podcast that celebrates the anniversary of movies anywhere from 10 years down to like 70 or 80 at this point. You know him as just, one of our nearest and dearest.
Oh, yeah.
If it's March, if it's March and it's the 1990s, you're going to hear him. Welcome back from Horrorversary, Adrian Torres.
I'm just having flashbacks to last year when I was like, oh, you know what? This looks like it's totally going to be easy. There's one movie right here, and there's one movie right here that I'm totally set for. And then I remembered, oh, Genius is involved. I've got to be on my guard.
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
Well, Listen, there are many decades out there that we could potentially have you tackle. But
yeah. No, but it wouldn't be Nightmare Junkhead, and it wouldn't be the friendship between Mr. Genius McGee and I if there wasn't some type of loving and combative nature to it. Like anytime that I listen to screencasts or screen drafts, and they mention that the show is about competitively collaborating, on what they're doing on the show, I'm like, that's Genius and I's friendship. That's what it is right there.
It comes at night, baby. It comes at night.
It's hereditary.
Yes, it is, and it's right in the middle of Midsommar.
So before all the madness takes place here, Adrian, where can our listeners find you out on social media? Please plug and promote away.
You could easily find me on Twitter at @YoAdrianTorres, which recently, since we're recording this, early, this last week they had the meme that was going around that was quote retweet and explain in photos what your screen handle is. So mine was really easy, just finding a picture of literally the Rocky saying "Yo Adrian" in the second film, and then an image of a field where you can put in your last name and typed Taurus in there, and it was very easy. The show you can find at Horrorversary. Again, I try to keep it very simple so you can actually find these things instead of start to type something and lots of weird stuff shows up. But at this time that the show's or that this episode's coming out, there should be a couple episodes for Horrorversary in there. We're getting ready to ramp up and and just trying to find out when people's scheduling things work. So when you hear this, hop on over there because you should be able to find some fun stuff.
I'm always looking forward to it because I do really enjoy the guests that you bring on, because everyone's just so genuine about their love of the movies.
And that's why I like doing it and continue doing it, because I think that if I was trying to do something that was a little bit more normal, being the type of person I am, and being as anxious and anxiety ridden as I can, I'd be like, well, there's like 75 different versions of this, and there's so many great voices out there. I cut out the middleman by saying, hey, we're going to focus on movies that are celebrating anniversaries that people, A, want to hear about. Then, B, I'm bringing on voices and people that they'd actually like to hear about. And then I've got a format where I'm not the person who has to do the most talking. So it's kind of a win-win-win.
Now, see, you're giving way too much behind the how the sausage is made there.
Because that's why we brought you on.
But I mean, it works, and I think like that's something that I love about listening to all these episodes from Into the Mouth of March Madness. I got it, one try, boom. Is the fact that you have so many returning guests, so you really get to know those people, especially if you listen to their shows. But then there's always a few new voices that you're bringing in from other great podcasts, so it becomes this giant collaborative thing. Over the last year, there was lots of either necessary or unnecessary or odd fragmentation when it came to the horror community. So when you get to see something like Into the Mouth of March Madness that you guys are doing, and you have all these voices coming together, it's saying, no, that horror, the community of horror as a whole in the world is just a giant, big melting pot of people who love the same things. And it's an example of getting to bring all of them together. So it's really wonderful what you guys do.
Thank you, man.
I wasn't prepared to cry or shed a tear.
Right? Well, thank you.
Well, listen, more than anything, it's just always an excuse to get together and talk horror movies with our friends. But we do try to have the familiar, but then also with some new voices. And here actually upcoming in the next decades, we have two podcasts actually they're going to be making their debut. But if it's the 90s, my friend, we're tight rolling our jeans, maybe sprucing up our hair. But 30 years ago, Adrian, do you remember what life was like at that time?
It's crazy to think about like the beginning 90s, the early 90s, because as you guys have been guests on Horrorversary, and you know that I'm a big fan of championing that weird period that people overlook, which is like when you have like the last 2 years of one decade going into the first 2 years of another decade, you have films that are both kind of paving the way to say this is what we want horror to be like, and you have films that are saying, well, we're still holding on to those things that you liked for it. So that's what's interesting about the movies we're going to be talking about, and then thinking about it in general is the beginning of the 90s are kind of this weird, crazy era where it's still really holding on to the 80s, but it's saying, hey, let's do some weird shit too. Also, people are going to be wearing lots of pastels and neons.
Yeah.
And leather. Lots of leather.
It does get weird.
Well, leather never goes out of fashion. It only chafes over time.
It becomes more comfortable.
Well, we have 4 films vying to get into the round of the Frightful Four to represent the year 1991.
That leathery goodness.
Oh, well, let's start with our first matchup here, and we have 2 just tonally different films.
Both about man-eaters.
We have Silence of the Lambs going up against Critters 3, and we're going to leave this open to our guest. Which of the 2 shall we delve into first?
We got to go Critters 3. We got to go Critters 3 because if you look at these 4 movies, I think it's kind of the outlier of all of them. Not necessarily the bad way. I mean, every film out there, of course, has its fans. But when you look at these, it's the one that nowadays you're kind of scratching your head a little bit about, because you have something like what's it called? Cast a Deadly Spell, which we'll get to in a little bit. But that in like the last several years, especially in the last year with HBO Max coming out, that you've had lots of people who've been talking about it. Whereas Critters 3 is a film that regardless of where you try to find it, you're going to have to put money down on it. And that's because it's a film that like, well, the only reason we're going to put it out anywhere is if we can make a little bit of cash on it.
I own the Critters 4-pack, and I'm a proud member of the Critters Army.
We're not trying to show any hands or anything, but which out of the 4 original Critters films would you say gets the least amount of rewatch from you?
Oh, by 04. 4 I think I've only seen twice. Critters 3 about 5 times. Critters 1 about maybe 6. Critters 2 about a dozen. At least.
Well, yeah, that's because one Mr. Genius Agee on command, he doesn't have to do it now, but would go into the full jingle from number 2, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Hungry Heifer.
Well, and then let me ask you all this, and posing this out. We obviously all kind of enjoy the Critters franchise. This one definitely is the outlier, but what I really enjoyed, and we kind of talked about it in the first round, is that this one at least is trying to expand, be it in the suburbs and the apartment setting, but it really gave me troll vibes, and I couldn't, minus the Cantos Profane score right there, which I think could have added an element to it. But do you remember initially, Adrian, was this one that you eventually caught because you had to via video, but do you remember when you eventually encountered this the first time?
I don't remember the first time that I watched it. I think it was one that I came to late in the game and had always seen like 1 and 2 and enjoyed them. And then like many other series, whether it be the Charles Band or Ghoulies or anything like that you forget. And you're like, oh, there's more of these movies. But no one really talks about these movies. I forgot about those. And then you watch them and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. So it was years and years later. I want to say that it was at like Video Library or something. I kind of stumbled upon it and was like, there's a Critters 3? Okay, I'll watch it.
I actually just bought Critters Attack. I was at a thrift store and checking shit out, and they had Critters Attack on Blu-ray for sale. I'm like, well, sold. That's what I don't have. That's the one with Dee Wallace. So yeah.
Well, that's the power of course, horror fans. We are very loyal, almost to a fault.
Yeah.
But the fact that a tiny terror, scurry is scary, all those things are timeless. There's a reason we go back to it. And I did like still the Kyoto Brothers, the practical effects, the design here. But being this was technically my first time viewing when we watched it.
Oh.
Well, I knew enough of. I've seen that because of the Leonardo DiCaprio, but I also, Adrian, watched The Quick and the Dead for the first time.
Oh, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
So watching those two within the vicinity, all I wanted him to do was take out a little 6-shooter and just start knocking them off one at a time. But didn't get that, but got to see just the origin of this superstar. And, how long has it been since you've watched Critters 3, do you think?
Oh, it's got to be at least 10, 15 years, okay. I'd say. Enough so that when I was reading up on it to get a refresher before I even started to watch it, and then jumped into the movie, anyone who's going to read the plot synopsis out there, it's wrong. It's just dead wrong. It doesn't matter where you go to read about it, whether it's on IMDb, Letterboxd, or what have you. They all mention the same thing, saying that this film takes place in a Los Angeles apartment.
Correct. You are 100% correct, Adrian. That is bullshit. It takes place in Topeka.
Because everybody forgets it. And one of the things that I think maybe endears the people who are on this podcast to the series a little bit more is the fact that number 1 and 2 take place in Grover's Bend. That they mention that it's in Kansas. And they mentioned that it's a little bit, that it's not that far away from Kansas City. The weird thing is, if you don't live here, the fact that in the third movie they mentioned Topeka is Topeka and Kansas City aren't right next to each other.
But they go to the big city. It's like we're going to Capital City, and so to Grover's Bend, the big city is Topeka. It is the capital. So yeah, I loved it.
Well, it's the second biggest city. Like it's not necessarily like, it's not like, hey, we're gonna go to New York City.
New York City.
It's like, no, we're not going to New York City. We're going just outside Atlantic City. Is when you're going to Topeka compared to Kansas City.
No.
Like, there's a big difference there.
No, it's the difference between Manhattan and Manhattan. There's a Manhattan, New York, and there's the other Manhattan.
It's the difference between a Critters 3 and a Ghoulies 3.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, quite honestly, no. So my apologies for having to have you seek this one out, but
No, whatever. Okay. I'm not sorry. Don't apologize,
$2.
dude. It's Critters 3. It's Critters 3.
It was $2.
That's fair. So that being said, did you enjoy the rewatch?
I did, and I didn't. There's for a movie that's an hour and 25 minutes, there's some parts that drag. But it's fun, even if it's tonally all over the place. It spends a lot of time kind of setting up. I mean, they're the Critters movies. You don't have to do a lot except for say that, oh, there's some eggs that are left over from the previous time. They don't really even do that. You just kind of had Charlie pop up, and then it's like, oh, there's some eggs over there, and you're like, well, what? Has he just been trolling through the fields just a little bit outside of Grover's Bend for a couple of years trying to find 5 eggs?
He's Charlie the Bounty Hunter. I mean, that's his job, to be the critter buster.
He has a gun that's partially made out of a can of pinto beans.
Right? He's the MacGyver. He's the hillbilly MacGyver of intergalactic bounty hunters. He's like Boba Fett.
He's more like Bubba Fett.
God. See, this is the kind of content we need for Patreon, man. I'm telling you.
Boba Fett. I'm telling you, the adventures of Boba
Fett.
That is top dollar. So from Critters 3, a film that, even your most seasoned horror fan may have not have seen, to a film that almost any normie probably has seen or at least knows about, Jonathan Demme's Silence of the Lambs. We talked about, our initial interaction with it. Adrian, what is your background with this particular movie?
It's Silence of the fucking Lambs, man. It's this just feels evil. I mean, you don't want to dunk on any movie, but just the fact that you're like, hey, it's Silence of the Lambs versus Critters 3, just saying that out loud is dunking on Critters 3 because you're talking about Silence of the Lambs. There's, as you put it, with normies or even people who maybe haven't fully jumped into the pantheon of watching every movie that's out there, people have heard of Silence of the Lambs. You're talking about, at this point, the show will have already started when this episode's out, but right now, for the last couple weeks, you've had trailers for the CBS show Clarice that are nothing but preying upon the fact that people know of the events in Silence of the Lambs, to the point where it doesn't really look like the show has any identity outside of the events from Silence of the Lambs. That's how much this film is baked into the collective consciousness of people. Silence of the Lambs is one of those movies that will always kind of stand the test of time. It's always a film that gets brought up in the argument of, is this horror? Is it not? Who cares about that? It's a, regardless of what field you want to put it into, it's a well-crafted, beautifully made procedural film that not only ended up influencing eons and decades of procedural television, but is a film that always ends up in conversation because of the amount of awards that it won.
Yeah, it is horror for everybody. That be the whole debate, is it horror? It's not. It's a serial killer looking for another serial killer, and they both eat people or skin people. So it's a horror movie, and it is one that once a horror movie about serial killers that won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, blah 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 blah. And the one that it's been mocked and parodied. And again, even if you've never seen the movie, if you hear hello Clarice or anything, you're instantly, you know what they're talking about. And meanwhile, it's not even really about Hannibal Lecter either. It's about Buffalo Bill. So, yeah.
Well, that's the best part of any good horror film. In the original Alien, you only see the alien itself for 3 to 5 minutes of the movie, and it's an hour and 50 minutes. In Silence of the Lambs, it's an hour and 50 minutes. You get about 5 to 10 minutes of, Hannibal the Cannibal. But you don't need any more of that. I think if you have done that, then you kind of show your hand. No, this movie is so depthly balanced. But Genius here actually... Oh, go ahead, Adrian.
I do have a question. If we're going by that logic, does that mean that Judi Dench is technically a mass murderer as well in Shakespeare in Love? Because she's only in the film for a short period of time, and she wins an award for that movie.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's Dame Judi Dench. Hell, thank you for letting me get to say Dame Judi Dench here on the podcast.
She needs to do a proper horror movie.
I would seek that out and watch it.
She plays Tangia.
The early year? No, technically it'd still be the later years. Yeah. No, Genius actually had a chance to watch Manhunter for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious now, having watching Manhunter and then Silence, not necessarily how they compared to each other, but just that world that they've created. The
Mythos?
Yes. Yeah, what is that like at this point, having watched those two back-to-back recently?
It's interesting, but they're two totally different Hannibal Lecters to me. You know? I'm not one to say, like, Anthony Hopkins is my Hannibal Lecter, but he's my Hannibal Lecter. While I enjoyed the evilness of Brian Cox's and the methodical of it, the mind games of it, just the sheer brutality of seeing it into play in Silence more cemented that image of him to me, of that character. So, like, when I think of Hannibal Lecter, I don't hear Brian Cox, I hear Anthony Hopkins. So
that's totally fair.
You mean you don't hear Mads?
No, I don't. You know what? That's one show I haven't got into, dude. I want to. I heard I would love it. I heard I would eat it with fava beans, but I haven't got it. So for me, yeah, Anthony Hopkins is, as of now, my Hannibal Lecter.
Genius. I'm proposing. I'm willing to do this with you as just a short little experiment, since you're jumping into it. If you want to do like a short limited podcast series of you jumping into that show, I would want to do that, just to, because that's one of those shows that you want everybody to see, and to see somebody who's experiencing it now, like after the fervor has died down and people have stopped asking Brian Fuller if there's going to be a fourth season. I want to hear your thoughts, especially because there's so many horror directors who are involved with it, whose names you know and like, and how many characters, that getting your reactions on it, because it's a great show, but it's also a polarizing show. So you should definitely dive into it.
We can call it the Mickelson Minute.
Yeah, I'm game. It writes itself.
The Mad Genius. The Mads Genius. There we go.
Well, Adrian, by any chance, did you see this one during in its original theatrical run?
Oh, no. That was a little bit before I got to the chance to do that. The very first R-rated theatrical movie that I ever got to see was Eraser.
Vanessa Williams. I'm saving the best for last.
I'd seen, some on home video and stuff by that point, was able to rent and watch stuff like that. But the first one that I got to see in the theater was my uncle took me to see that movie, because he's like, oh, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's going to be the greatest thing known to man. And then you walk into it and you're like, wait, what happened now? He just shot an alligator in the face, and yet it wasn't the coolest thing in the world.
Well, Chuck Russell can only do so much, let's face it.
Okay, early there's that jumping point of early Chuck Russell to I'll bring it up. I am Wrath, Chuck Russell.
We'll get to that. So obviously we enjoy both of these films, but only one can make it into the round of the Hateful Eight. And the first little bit of a criteria we have is so nice we do it twice. We're going to ask, which of the two films is closer to your heart?
Closer to the heart.
Pulling on the nostalgia strings. So, Adrian, between Silence of the Lambs and Critters 3, which is closer to your heart?
Well, if I look deep inside me and find where the crite is gnawing away at my soul, that's going to be the one that I have to kick to the curb. I'm going to put the lotion on the skin so I don't get the hose again, and choose Silence of the Lambs, because you can't. I mean, I know there's plenty of points where people are working on their brackets for this, and there's a point that it gets blown up, and I can sense in my bones that there will be some point where Silence of the Lambs is the one that gets left off, that everybody's lamenting, didn't make it forward. I don't want to start that when it comes to something like this. Like, it's Silence of the Lambs. It's a movie that it's when you look at the horror movies that are on the Criterion Collection that are on the disc, it's not as vast a list of movies as you'd want it to be. And yet Silence of the Lambs, anytime it gets put out on a disc that's Criterion, that it's always championed. It doesn't matter if it was a Laserdisc, doesn't matter if it was DVD, doesn't matter if it was the Blu-ray that they put out. They keep on finding things to put into it, and they keep on finding ways to clean it up and have it look more beautiful and have things to say about it. And you don't get that with every movie. No offense to Critters 3, you're not going to have that same thing as time goes on. But Silence of the Lambs is one of those foundation blocks. It might not be every person's favorite film, but it's instrumental in how lots of people process mainstream horror, even though it feels like it might be kind of outside of that. So I there's no way, to my opinion, when you're going to the one that's closer to the heart, I would have to rip out my heart if I didn't choose Silence of the Lambs.
Okay, that is truly showing one's work. Genius. This one might. I mean, listen, we're all delaying. I think what some people say is the inevitable. We like to be thorough here.
Oh yeah.
So, which of the two is closer to your heart?
Critters 3. No. Actually, here's the thing about this one. I grew up with Krites. I grew up like championing Krites. I still think this is a fun movie. Yeah, it's diminishing returns because if you ask me, my Critters is Critters 2, right? But at the same, I got to give love for Critters 3. But I remember vividly seeing this in the theater, questioning what was going on, getting the hands put in front of me, and still looking around the corner and seeing what's going on. Meanwhile, would you fuck me? I'd fuck. What's going on? Nothing. I'll tell you later, right? And to this fucking day. You remember we were at this place and like it was like I can name that tune in 2 seconds. Oh no, we were watching Maniac, and the soonest cue or anytime I hear just the boom, boom, the first two notes of Q Lazarus, I'm like, is that Q Lazarus? I can't watch Monk without going into this Ted Levine like death spiral, and like. Yeah, it is so ingrained in my DNA that I would be remiss, like you, Adrian, if I didn't say Silence of the Lambs.
It's a Pavlovian response for Genius. For anybody who has seen him out in the wild, if that song starts playing for a second, Genius starts doing the little dance, and it comes out of nowhere. He starts with the lipstick, of course, and if you know him and you see him start doing that, you just go, oh, fuck, it's going to happen. Oh, no. And half the time we accidentally say that out loud, and people who haven't witnessed it are like, wait, what's going to happen? Yeah. And then there goes Genius.
Would you
start sashaying the hips. And the shoulders go, and you're like, well.
I'd fuck me so hard. Boom, right? Like, okay, so you are 100% correct, dude. The fucking thing, to really quick, fucking, I had this song, so I made the playlist at work back in the Moon Marble days, and I put that song on there, right? And every time that song came on, I talked to my coworker Kay to the point where she's like, next time you make that playlist, take that fucking song off. And I'm like, what's the matter, Kay? You don't want to dance with me, right? And so it's so ridiculous. And then remember when it popped up in Maniac? When it popped up in Maniac, and like the first fucking thing, she goes, "Hey, let's put on some music." Boom! I'm like, "Is that good? Is that cute?" But it is. Would you fuck me? That made the movie. That coined the phrase "deal sealer." You know. So there's something about Silence of the fucking Lambs, Pavlovian, sir. Like as you said, just I can't help myself. It's ridiculous.
So you're voting for Silence of the Lambs, right?
No, Critters 3. No.
Listen to what he said.
So my vote also is Silence of the Lambs. I also had a horribly awkward theatrical viewing of it, and my folks didn't so much cover my eyes as just go, yeah, Greg, that's multiple MIGs. We already know you're flinging that in your room. I was 14 at the time, so they knew. But all of those things just, even like I said, Adrian, I had my dad check the house before I would go in because I was just so freaked out. So yeah, of course my vote being closer to the heart is Silence of the Lambs. Now, that being said, from the heart to the head, we're actually asking if you were to remove one of these films from the year of 1991, which one would leave the year horror? Stop it. Stop it. We are not punching down on this one, my friend.
No, we're not. I love Critters. I love Critters 3.
So, Adrian, we're going to let you start this.
Have Genius go first on this
Genius.
one. I want to make sure that we're
Being
either
fair.
in unison or if I have to leave.
Right? No. Even fans of Critters like 1 and 2 don't know if that there's a Critters 3, you know? Hell, some people don't even know there's a Critters 2. Right? Yet it's done by Mick Garris. So if Critters 3 disappeared, cool. You know, we'd still... I'm not saying cool isn't like fine, but, you know, we still got 2. And I'm okay with that, as long as we have 2. But if we take away Silence of the Lambs, we take away horror for normies. We take away, like, an Oscar award. A proof, many years before Shape of Water and Fish Sticks, that a horror movie, hardcore horror, is worthy of Academy Awards, is worthy of talk and praises and think pieces. So anybody who looks down on horror fans or horror in general, Silence of the Lambs shuts them the fuck up. So without that, who knows where we would be? The fact that it can make horror for the mainstream is a profitable, wonderful film with a capital F. Something that us horror fans have known for decades. They just now found out with Silence of the Lambs. So yeah, Silence of the Lambs would leave this cinema horror without it.
Showing the work. Nice work.
Well, I had to look up because I was like, I don't want to completely speak out of turn when it comes to the Academy Awards part. So I wanted to double check. And the interesting thing about that is that you still would have had a thriller horror adjacent film that was nominated for a whole bunch of awards that was still there in that year in Cape Fear, which is the interesting thing. I mean, Silence of the Lambs, like I said, that changes the way things look when it comes to having all those procedurals, whether that's, you know, a good thing or a negative thing in some people's eyes. I mean, CBS might not exist possibly if we didn't have that. But I mean, when you have a film that causes that seismic stir and changes something in the water the way that film does, that I think that's why you can't remove Silence of the Lambs, because you're still going to have little creature features. You're still going to have Charles Band type films that are out there that they might not be completely similar, but they're in that ilk of stuff like Critters. So I think by removing Silence of the Lambs, you do have this giant ripple effect that occurs.
Excellent work. And what's interesting, and we've all mentioned it before, is the fact that both of these are franchises that are still putting out material to this day.
Yeah.
Which is kind of incredible. So the question is, if you were to take away one of them, well, one of them, for the most part, you can still backtrack to Manhunter. That still has the ripple effect. Critters 3, obviously you have Critters 2, but if you take away 1991, you take away both Genius and I's theatrical experience, and it's still, I hate to harp on it, but man, that was awkward and fun and crazy, and I could never have that replaced. So by a straight count of 6-0, sashaying its way into the round of the Hateful Eight is Silence of the Lambs.
Goodbye, critters. They're rolling over you. Goodbye, critters. Would you kill more crates with me? I'd kill more crates. I'd kill more crates so hard.
Which is going to lead us to possibly the most interesting matchup that we've had, at least a discussion so far. We have Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs going up against an HBO original, Cast a Deadly Spell. Oh my goodness gracious, I don't even know which one to start with. Hey, you know what, Adrian? Which one shall we delve into first?
I hate you. I hate you so much. Let's go with people. No, let's do. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off. Let's go for Cast a Deadly Spell.
You're ripping the Band-Aid off. Oh my goodness, this sounds like there's a story here.
No, it's Okay, we'll just start, and then I'll jump into it because I have some things that I'm pulling as strangers with candy. I've got something to say. I've got something to say.
Anytime you need to go Jerry Blank, my friend, that is
Right.
totally fine. That is totally fine. So I'm curious then, because this was something that I know with Genius and I both had some personal ties to it. So let's lay out on the couch. What's going on here?
So it's a fun film. It's an exceedingly fun film. It's a great idea. The fact that you have it in the same bracket as Critters is interesting because this movie is the made-for-TV film, but it feels more theatrical than Critters thing. Which again, those are budgets. I'm not trying to, but it's talking about what I think makes this film work is that it definitely has that theatricality to it. It takes on the greatness of being able to emulate the 40s in a way where it doesn't feel too hinky and it feels more genuine and of that time and the writing as opposed to we're really pushing these jokes and they're not working. The crazy tonal balance it's going for like works really well because of how seriously they're playing things as opposed to letting it fully go into the we're going to acknowledge that everything kind of has an airplane feel to it, but we're playing it more straight so it works better. But then you have a couple little elements in the film that don't seem to get talked about that I feel like in this day and age we do need to. And because there's plenty of films when we look back at them nowadays. I was on a podcast recently where we talked about the Monster Squad for a minute. And of course, we've talked up on the Monster Squad.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're taking time to mention, hey, Monster Squad's great, but there's these couple little elements here, we have to do the same thing for something like Cast a Deadly Spell.
Oh, yeah.
And we're talking about a film where a character by an actor that I enjoy is reduced to I know it was in the time when it was made, but you can't really go back in the time when it comes to transphobia. And having a trans character get needlessly assaulted in their second scene in the movie without being able to talk at all. You have the F word casually dropped in there in conjunction. You have a story point that does involve, even if it's consensual, it's still statutory rape. That's being a plot point. And you have, God, what was there? There was, the racism
Yeah.
is like, I saw this movie years ago and I forgot about how entwined that is. That, yeah, to be like, hey, we're technically making a comment on slavery is one thing, but then playing it for laughs and not really making that point of saying why it's bad to have slaves and stuff. It would just like part of it was like ooh. So it's got all these things that I really liked, and then you got those points that stand out. And I mean, you guys are probably going to say it, but it was something when I was watching it, I was like, I want to say something because I need to say something because it stood out as weird to me.
No, and we actually mentioned that in that first round because
Okay.
when it's a good thing that we can approach these things critically and look at it in a modern lens.
And nowadays,
Yeah, especially that, and to be sensitive of those differences and to be aware of how they were represented at that time. And we always have to do with another time,
another place.
warning with a lot of these films. And well, let me ask you this: how long has it been since you've actually watched Cast a Deadly Spell?
I can't tell you. Like it's been a long time. I've had it on the watch list for a while. Like because it's popped up places. It was on Prime for a period of time before it ended up on HBO Max. I want to say that was a couple years ago because you had on Prime, you were able to get both Cast a Deadly Spell and Witch Hunt were on Prime at the same time. And so I made sure to click them both, and then didn't really have a chance to watch them. And then when got HBO Max, it popped up on the list. I'm like, oh, I gotta watch this. So I was excited when you guys were like, hey, this is one of the ones we need you to watch. I'm like, oh man, it's been a while. I remember that being lots of fun, and I was watching it. I'm like, yeah, this is lots of fun. And then it was like, oh, then there's that bit, and then it goes back to being fun, and then it is that bit.
Yeah. No, that's definitely what this watch, because I watched this when it first came out because it was part of HBO free weekend, and that was a huge fucking deal. And so I watched it and fell in love with it and thought it was fantastic, and maybe watched it once since then, but again, seeing it in Fangoria and all that good stuff. But then upon this rewatch, you're 100% you're like, oh, this is a lot of fun. This is great, and it's like a great melding of, oh yeah, that's not so good. It's almost, you almost have to do two another time in other places, because yes, it wasn't like that. It was still irrehensible, but it wasn't that frowned upon as it is now, and even more so in the 40s of the movies that it's aping. So at the same time, you're like, oh yeah. Ooh.
Well, it's always interesting if that's the kind of authenticity you want to go with in a movie where we have like Lovecraftian monsters and what have you. It's like, you don't have to go that authentic, in terms of cultural representation. We live in a world of magic and monsters, so let's go a little bit beyond. But again, at least, and we are mentioning this because it does deserve to be talked about, which is, no, this is a good thing, Adrian. This is why the kind of discourse we like to bring you on for that. Now, that being said, let me ask you this. Clancy Brown, yes or no with the mustache?
It's Clancy Brown, so yes for everything. I mean, come on. I mean, Clancy Brown had a wonderful 2020. For most people, they consider one of his most recent outputs being 2021, but I had seen his most recent film in 2020. So last year you had both the Mortuary collection and Promising Young Woman. And the fact that he shows up in Promising Young Woman, you're like, wait, Clancy Brown is in this for a few minutes? That's fantastic. And somebody was like, who a great parent duo would be is Clancy Brown and Jennifer Coolidge. And you're like, okay, I'm on board.
Not at all. No, that was a nice little surprise there. No, this was a fun first time watch for me. It's really funny. I had HBO, and I had assumed, because I saw so much of the promotional material with this, that I had seen most of the film. And when I watched it, I was like, wait, no, this is the first time. So watching it with fresh eyes, with this weird bit of nostalgia, it had the total cognitive dissonance feel, which actually I like now, kind of being older with that.
And David Warner.
And it was the Rick Dalton thing where you're just like, oh, hey, it's that person and it's that person, and putting them in this world, which, let me ask you, Adrian, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer. Have you watched the follow-up with Dennis Hopper?
No, I never got around to it. I was curious because of how, I mean, that's what's interesting about the second film is that you switch Fred Ward out for Dennis Hopper. I did see in the cast list that you keep Hippa. Oh God, I'm going to mispronounce her last name. But the wonderful witch who shares the office space with him. I guess she was the same actress who returned, and I think that was like the only person. But then it was Paul Schrader who directed that.
Wow!
What?
Wow!
Yeah. So you go from, I mean, you have Martin Campbell being the one who directed this, but you go from Martin Campbell, which first of all you have Martin Campbell, who's just a couple years away from GoldenEye at this point, but then you go to Paul Schrader.
Quite the opposite for Duncraft, for me. Sorry. So let's go ahead. Let's stray away from Cast a Deadly Spell and let's look into.
Well, I do have one question about a film that rewatching it this time stuck out in my mind, and so I wanted to ask you guys if you'd seen the film, because even talking about it now and talking about tone and stuff, and it's another movie from 1991 that's more in the airplane. That's like the tonal opposite of this, where it takes that. Being a gag of minute and pushing it, but still having the gumshoe and the police and crazy stuff going on in Blood-Sucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh.
No, I have not seen that one, but I have heard of that one. That is one that I have heard of.
I have no clue of what you were speaking of. I thought you were messing with me, and then you didn't know.
No, that's a real thing.
It's because it like even the plot is a police detective teams up with his buddy's daughter to investigate cult ritual mutilations.
And it's mummies.
Weird.
Yeah.
So technically, then there are 3 movies in 1991 that have that weird revolving. That is bizarre.
But like I said, this one's more in like the wacko and pandemonium type vibe. Like if you thought that Fred Ward smoked a lot of cigarettes and cast a deadly spell, there is a scene in Blood-Sucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh that completely outdoes it. I mean, it doesn't fully work. And I think it's why Cast a Deadly Spell is fun when it does work by understanding that tone, because this one tries to go for the same thing but is completely overboard.
Well, I mean, with a name like Blood-Sucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh, you're not expecting fucking Merchant Ivory, you know? So,
I mean, the special effects in it, it's definitely a movie where the special effects and gore that's in the movie would be the reason why I would suggest like checking it out. It was on Prime last year. I don't think it is anymore. I was trying to see who did the effects work on it because they're very memorable.
Let me ask you guys a question. Would you live in this world? Because to me, Cast a Deadly Spell it created a world. I mean, it did great with the world building. So that being said, is this a world you would live in?
I think the answer relies on how lazy you are, because it seems like magic is a pretty easy, like just very instant kind of fix. Again, if I was in my 20s, probably not. But now that I'm in my 40s, oh, goodness gracious. If you can make that trip to the bathroom that much easier and quicker for me and magic can be involved, I might sell my soul to Satan. Yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in.
Adrian? I think I'd give it a try. It'd be interesting. I mean, I'd be worried about gremlins a lot more. Let's put it this way. Krites are in Kansas in outer space. Gremlins are everywhere in this movie. So there's something you have to deal with. And the answer to the special effects for that other movie was Tom Savini.
Oh, there it is.
And speaking of gremlins, we've had them since WWII. So
I think that guy was low-key one of my favorite characters in the movie.
Yeah.
Was the landlord.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Was. Completely. And the condescending gargoyle as well. So from an HBO original to one that definitely hit the theaters, and it's always good to be able to talk Wes Craven into the mouth of March Madness, but especially when we veer away from Freddy and we go into his original content, and you can't get more original than The People Under the Stairs. So Adrian... Oh no, it returns. Adrian, what was your initial interaction with this one? Background, tell us, did you knock on the door of The People Under the Stairs?
I want to say that it was home video. I don't remember where. I know the funny thing is, I know we've talked about this movie at least once on the show before, and then at length in person when we showed it for Terror Tuesday a couple of years ago. So like People Under the Stairs is one of those movies that just keeps coming up, which I'm glad that it is, because for years it felt like the Craven film that lots of people just kind of forgot about, didn't really talk about for who knows why. But I definitely remember renting it from the video store because of that cover art. You see that cover art, and you're like, what is this? I want it. You've got the house, you've got the face. Yeah, I'm very curious, and you get something that's not exactly what you think would be going on with that, but the film goes so many different places, and you're talking about tones in lots of these movies, and I think what's wonderful about the tone that he chooses in People Under the Stairs is what is special about horror. And that if you get people to pay attention to your film because it's over the top, because it's ridiculous, because it's campy, because it's exploitation, whatever that is, that when they're susceptible to those things, they're susceptible to understanding and seeing the message that you have, which of course, it goes back to everybody talking about why Romero films work so well in their early going, is because you show them something that they can understand or they can get into. And then when you have the messages come in, they're willing to open up to that because they've already opened themselves up to the film. And I know there's lots of people who kind of sit on the fence for People Under the Stairs, but for the people who watch it and get it, I think it's because of those unexpected things he's doing with the movie that opens people up to what he's saying.
And it's my rewatch of it, because I also caught it on home video as well. I wasn't lucky enough, although Genius did have, and you'll have to go back to our first round episode, just a interesting theatrical experience in 1991 between this and Silence of the Lambs.
Right.
It was the year of just weird, awkward awakenings within one Genius McGee.
Did you go with your family, Genius?
Oh yeah, I went with my family all the time to go see horror movies. In fact, I still do. And so
yeah, I know. I was going to say maybe that's a thing, because if you put together some of those situations even today that you're going with your family, you're having interesting experiences with them. Maybe that's something that it's like, well, why don't we just go see a comedy or an action film instead? Because there's a history there.
Oh yeah, let's go see a Christmas movie. I heard December's playing. So
hey, you know what? Let's actually stay with that and Terror Tuesday, because I also had the opportunity to see Dial Code Santa Claus, aka Deadly Games.
Happy birthday, Christmas!
As a first time at Terror Tuesday, but it's a movie that also plays similar to People Under the Stairs, based on the similarities between Tomas and Fool. And having watched them recently within the same vicinity, it just played so nicely. But when was the last time that you actually watched People Under the Stairs before this one?
People understand. It was Terror Tuesday, so it was only like, I want to say, it wasn't last year.
It was the year before that, right?
Yeah, I want to say it was 2019. So just under two years, I believe. And it, like, showing the power of that movie, or just Wes Craven in general, was that the majority of the people who were there at that screening had never seen the film before, and there were so many discussions going on afterwards for people dissecting it and talking about how much they enjoyed it. And it's like that's what I like about, Wes Craven, or getting to show a film like that people have heard of, and it might be an I've seen that for them, but when they actually get a chance to see it and get to engage with it.
Well, let me ask you this. Was this before? Did you see this before or after Pulp Fiction? I.e., what was your first GIMP experience?
And Ving Rhames.
No, I want to say that it was before.
Okay.
Oh God.
I didn't even think about that Ving Rhames connection right there. You could make the kinkiest double feature between
Ving Rhames and the GIMP connection.
Wow.
Someday we'll find it. The Ving Rhames GIMP connection.
Oh no.
The paddles.
The GIMP.
And
me.
Jesus. I apologize.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to zip that one shut, Genius.
As we always do here.
Amber.
Well, that's the other thing. I think the nice surprise with this, and especially rewatching it, is how funny the movie really is. How the socially relevant messages are still
fucking prescient to this day.
And it's also another collection of great character actors
of
people to this day that when we actually mention it, you could make a very interesting remake of the movie with a lot of the same people, even reprising the roles, which leads me...
Big Rhames still do it.
And you'd like to think that, well, no, Wendy Roby's still with us, is she not?
I believe so.
Yeah, and we know Everett McGill is with us, so I think Fool would be game.
Sean Whalen's definitely signing up for it.
Oh, yeah, he is. Yeah,
Whalen's in there.
And like Sean Whalen reprises his role as he's rolling into the house.
He's been in 5 million things, but he will always be
Roach.
Neil Frogert from Lord of the Rings, or not, sorry, from Lost, because of his Hobbit look.
Who, Roach? Mm-hmm. Oh no, he's always gonna be Roach to me. Even when he showed up in like Hatchet 3, like, what's Roach?
Well, and that's actually the kind of the awesomeness of the fact that he could exist within three people's references, and it's just as real.
I'm surprised that Genius didn't even go for his small guest stint on It's Always Sunny.
He was on. Was he in McPoyle?
Yeah.
Was he?
Which one? He was in the courtroom scene with Pappy and Guillermo del Toro. That's right. I'm lying, McPoyle. Bring me their eyes. He does look like a McPoyle. He could be a McPoyle. DJ Qualls could be a McPoyle. Steve Buscemi could be a McPoyle. Dude, they could have the whole McPoyle family reunion. You know, just like, hey man, you got any milk? You know, just yeah. No, but at the same time, People Under the Stairs is fucking. It's caca. That is so good. Ever since that last reviewing, I like go around the house. Caca. Yeah, great.
Sad animal moment though.
Yes and no.
Genius we had a discussion in the first round on that because we've recently watched a few films that have featured some animal violence, and we're always making sure to let people know beforehand because that is very triggering. But Genius had an interesting take on it. Go ahead.
Okay. He's a bad dog. He's not a good dog. He's a bad dog. But it was fucking hilarious when he slid. That cracked my shit up. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, we don't want him to like, you know, be. He had to go. I'm sorry, but he was not a good dog. I will always unless it's like a crazy like a feral dog, I always go for there are no bad dogs. There's just dogs that are raised bad.
He was the bad owners.
He was fed human meat. Doesn't that like affect people?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. What did you say? He was fed human meat. He didn't just wake up one morning and he's like, you know what? Casually, of my own accord, of my own volition, I'm going to start ripping out throats.
And I didn't even realize, technically, in the mouth of March Madness here this year, we've got 2 meat-eating dogs.
Yeah, human meat-eating dogs.
And People Under the Stairs.
Oh, no.
It's kind of crazy. Well, let's go ahead and decide which of these 2 films is going to be battling Silence of the Lambs in the round of the Hateful Eight. So, Adrian, let me ask you, The People Under the Stairs or Cast a Deadly Spell, which of the 2 is closer to your heart?
I'm going to go with People Under the Stairs. I think that's one that's closer to the heart. It's Wes Craven, and like I said, it's the Wes Craven that more people are finally coming around to see, and it's not like people are coming around to see The Hills Have Eyes 2. It's People Under the Stairs. Like you mentioned, it's got a great cast. It's got a lot going on. It's wild and all over the place. I think for lots of people, there's a lot that you can take from it. As in, like, if you're people who like plenty of different things, you've got, you know, the social commentary that's baked in there. You've got Bill Cobb's that's in there. That's always going to get you extra points. You've got the campiness. You've got the exploitation elements. You've got the roach aspect of it. You've got the home invasion. That's technically flipped where the bad guys are already inside the house. So you've got a lot that's going on, and like that's like it just speaks to me. No offense to again Cast a Deadly Spell, because there's lots that's fun with it, but it's Wes Craven, man.
Right.
It's Wes Craven, man. That's a power phrase. Genius.
I fucking love People Under the Stairs. Roach is one of those characters, well, it's Roach. I thoroughly enjoy it, but if I have to be honest with myself, I gotta go Cast a Deadly Spell for the simple fact is I remember being excited because it was the HBO free weekend. I remember seeking it out. I remember getting in trouble for cutting the pictures out of the Fangoria of Cast a Deadly Spell. I mean, I was called like a devil worshiper by my middle school shop teacher. That cemented that in my place for Closer to the Heart. I gotta go Cast a Deadly Spell.
That's totally fair. And I'm going to just say I have to bow to the power of HBO propaganda, because beyond that whole thing, the it casted a deadly spell on me. That is pure nostalgia for me. And then revisiting it, even with the problematic stuff, It was pure nostalgia in my veins. So I'm also going to vote for Cast a Deadly Spell. Now, that being said, from the heart to the head, we're going to ask, if you took one of these films away, which one would leave 1991 poorer? Who would like to go first? Adrian, Genius?
I can go first because I don't know which way this is going to go, and I was on the side of good for the first one, so I have to say I'm gonna disparage early just in case my film doesn't get through. That technically this is 2 times now that in general it was a completely different combination, but that Greg has been swayed by the power of HBO for a movie that might have some problematic elements. If you go back to his utterance of "Stay tuned," and that "Stay tuned" being played on HBO got a pass because of how often it played on HBO. I digress, though. I have a decision to make. This one's actually a lot tougher when you get down and you want to show your homework for it, because and this is another year where you have where I'm on and there's a TV movie that's being brought up, and the fact that TV movies don't really get remembered a lot. You don't have a ton that really stand out. You need something that's either being adapted off of a Stephen King book, or you need a situation where you had a highly touted, original, out there, weird film like Cast a Deadly Spell to stick in people's minds. But at the same time, you've got Wes Craven. And we're talking about 1991, so we have to look at the other films that were coming out of it and stuff. And I think Wes Craven in the 90s, we have to remember, because you have this movie in 91. I can't remember what comes out between this and Scream that he does, but they looked at Scream as kind of being a return in a way for him to having, this huge mega smash hit, which kind of feels like it's disparaging to People Under the Stairs in a way. And yet it's a film that I feel is important to his filmography and the way that he's making stuff. So I have to go with that decision, because I think at any point, especially if you're looking in the 90s and you're wanting to take a Wes Craven film out of the pantheon of films, I think that it's a lot it's a lot lesser for having that exclusion, because especially when it comes into the 90s and it comes to horror and you're looking at mainstream, there's people forget about the films that are coming out at that time, and People Under the Stairs is one that's definitely getting that resurgence. And so I think by not having it there, you make that point in time that much weaker.
Genius.
So if you take away People Under the if you take away Cast the Deadly Spell, the thing about that one, it's so unique, it's so interesting, it's such an outliner, but yet still nobody has seen it. Even if we take it away, it's not going to hinder cinema, because there's still not a lot of proper different Detective 40 genre movies in Cthulhu. There's even not a lot of Cthulhu things. It wasn't until recently with like Richard Stanley and all stuff like that the interest started coming back. So I don't think that Cast the Deadly Spell was the big giant influence on that. That being said, lesser Craven is some of the best Craven. And so if you take away like that and Shocker, you're missing some of the better stuff. You're also missing something prominent that can still be played today and still have that same bite and same hit. And I think that relevance and the fact that the problems are still going on makes it a bit more detrimental to leave it. Because no matter what, if you watch this, let's say you watch both these movies 20 years down the line, right? You probably can't relate so much as a 40s detective in a world of magic, right? But you could probably relate to even the problems that are going on. Again, I don't live in a world of magic and monsters as much as I would love to, but I do live in a world where the greedy are corrupt and will shit on everybody else in the neighborhood to profit themselves. And so for that, I'm going to say my vote is People Under the Stairs.
Showing
It comes
your-
down to you, Greg.
Oh,
it comes down to you.
It's a very easy vote here. Literally, if you take away Cast a Deadly Spell, in the same year, 1991, we have a film that Cast a Deadly Spell beat, The Resurrected. Like you said, it's just one of those things. You still have representation of a detective Lovecraft story. I mean, that's so niche, but you have multiple of those in 91. What you don't have is another Wes Craven original like People Under the Stairs. It's hard to find a movie like that nowadays, much less in 1991. So you take that away from me, oh my goodness, I'm freaking out. I am freaking out. So of course it's going to get my vote. And by a count of 4-2, making its way into the round of the Hateful Eight is People Under the Stairs. Which means in the round of the Hateful Eight, we have Silence of the Lambs and People Under the Stairs.
Fuck.
That's, you know what? I think that may have been in my bracket, actually.
Oh.
So
Because you know those two movies are somebody's absolute favorite.
Indeed. Now, we couldn't have gotten here without the help of you, Adrian. And man, seriously, beyond the podcast and doing all this kind of stuff, man, it's beyond nice to see you, to hear from you, and to, of course, have you as part of the tradition of this, man. And regardless of whether they are good movies or bad, this is something that is always good to look forward to and to just keep striving, man. So, sincerely.
I have a very quick side question that I wanted to ask you guys, since it's been stuck in my head while we've been thinking about Cast a Deadly Spell. I think I know what the answer is, but we've been talking about representation, and of course, just a couple years within the vicinity of Cast a Deadly Spell, you have a certain film called Lord of Illusions.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which one do you guys take? I know they're technically tonally different films, but which one do you prefer out of those two?
Well, unfortunately, with Lord of Illusions, it's an
no.
seen that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Dude, it's dope. Dude, it's got Bacula.
I know.
It's got shirtless Bacula.
Yeah. Yeah. Sexula. No, no, it's a weird detective versus magic story. That's a hard one, Adrian, because I really enjoyed Lord of Illusions, but I think I have more fun with Cast a Deadly Spell. And a movie that I can have more fun with is going to beat out something that's going to like potentially scar me.
I'll go for it. I was just curious because, as much as there's different, there are similarities in there, even though Lord of Illusions is more, more modern than, Cast a Deadly Spell. You still have definitely those worlds are crossing over and their similarities and everything.
Well, it's funny because I always put together a trailer reel before I watch a movie, and of course that was in the trailer reel. So
Nice.
I know there is a Scream Factory Blu-ray out there that they put out, which I'm going to probably end up picking up regardless. Yeah, but no, sincerely, man. And gang, if you all like what you hear with Adrian, and how can you not, make sure you're checking out Horrorversary. It is a pleasure to talk with you, my friend, and I just continued success, man. Love you and the family. We'll talk off mic, of course, but wait here just for a few minutes here, gang, because when we come back,
Ken Sledgehammer Horror will be joining us to talk both People Under the Stairs and Silence of the Lambs. Would you fool me? I'd fool me.
We are back, and as we go from the round of the Scream 16 into the round of the Hateful Eight, let us again thank Adrian from Horrorversary. And of course, let us say goodbye, farewell, and adieu to both Critters 3 and Cast a Deadly Spell.
Oh, man.
Any other day, we could be talking
Right?
Critters 3 and Cast a Deadly Spell. But unfortunately, they both left in the last round. Now we have two films left in the year of 1991. Only one will make it to the round of the Frightful Four. It's a lot of pressure on us.
They're chomping tooth and nail and tongue, and they're
beating each other pretty good.
Well, you know what? Thankfully, Genius, it doesn't fall on all of our shoulders here.
Right.
As you all know, we like to bring in some of our favorite people in horror. Now, our next guest, you heard him as a guest lecturer with our Splatter University episode. He has been interviewing some of horror's, best and brightest. Please welcome back to Nightmare Junkhead from Sledgehammer Horror, Ken Sledge.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. This is so awesome. I've been so excited for this since we talked about it. 2 great movies that are going to battle it out here.
Well, you know what? You were kind enough back in the day to invite us on Sledgehammer Horror really when you were getting started. And first and foremost, congratulations on the show's success and the growth. And you have had some of my favorite people in horror on. Tell us how the journey's been since you last talked with us.
Oh, man. It's just like, sometimes you just like get super lucky, and I feel like that's what it is. I've been so lucky that I hate to say it like this because I sound like an asshole, man, but COVID really helped me out. And trust me, I would take that away in a heartbeat if I could. For those of you that don't know me or the channel, my wife is a respiratory therapist. It's something I'm very proud of. She does one of the segments on Sledgehammer Horror with me called Didn't See That Coming. And so if I could take away the pain and suffering that people have had from COVID, I would do it in a heartbeat. But I've been so lucky to have some people that are big influences on me. James and Chelsea from Dead Meat, I just had them on recently, which was super amazing to be able to talk to them. And Lou Taylor Pucci is somebody that's always been super influential in my life, and being able to sit down and talk to him. And by the time this airs, she would have already been on. But this Friday, 2 days from now, Lar Park Lincoln, Tina from Friday the 13th, Part 7, is coming on. And, I'm very, very excited to have her. Upcoming, I have Rochelle Davis, who played Sarah in The Crow. She'll be coming on and hanging out with me for a little bit. So, very excited. And it's one of those things where I just feel super blessed. Every day, it's just like, it's weird, being able to talk to these people and people that have inspired me my whole life. Like Sarah in The Crow, Rochelle, when she, slow down, you dickhead. That's something that, I thought that was the greatest thing ever when I was a kid. And, it can't rain all the time. That scene wouldn't have been possible without her. And that's something I've legit put that into my own personal life. And it's something I teach my kids, no matter how bad things get, it can't rain all the time. So that's how influential that movie is on me as not only a person, but as a father. So to be able to sit down and talk to her is something that I'm very, very much looking forward to.
And at this point, you've had several Jasons on your show. I mean, you are reaching out to some of horror royalty. And from the get-go, one of the things that I've truly enjoyed with your approach is, again, how genuine you are and just how much you enjoy doing this. And it shows, and you can hear it, you can see it, you can smell it on the better, episodes. So it is greatly appreciated. As a fan of, YouTube content, which, by the way, where can our listeners find Sledgehammer Horror?
YouTube.com/Sledgehammer Horror. Instagram at Sledgehammer Horror, Facebook at Sledgehammer Horror, and then Twitter at Sledgehammer Horror, HOR, not the full horror. And man, like Ari Lehman, the first Jason to pop out of the lake, like that was super intense for me. I just feel blessed, man. Like there's these people that horror is such a loving community, and these people really, once you start talking to them and you shoot your ideas at them, they're usually pretty good about responding. I have somebody coming up soon that has agreed to do the show. We haven't set a date yet, so I don't really want to get, those details out too much. But I will say that this female influenced me at a young age to stay away from camp. So we'll put it that way.
Is she a possible mangled dick expert?
She has a very great smile when she wants to, but I would never let her curl my hair.
Oh, fuck. No, or cook corn.
So, yeah.
Well,
yeah. I'm never going to cook any large pots of corn anywhere near her either. So, So now we all know. Felissa has agreed to come on the show. We are in the process of setting a date right now due to some scheduling that she's doing, but she did reach out to me. I did an episode with Dave Sheridan, who played Officer Doofy in Scary Movie.
Yep.
And they're very good friends, and Dave is one of the kindest, most genuinely nice guys I've ever met. He'll still text me to this day like, "Hey, how you doing? If you ever need me for anything else on the show, I'll be happy to help." Such a great guy. I'll support him till the end of the world. And he hooked me up with Felissa, and we're going to be doing an episode together on her first horror movie. So that's one that I'm genuinely very, very excited about, because Sleepaway Camp, I've always said as a kid, the two twist endings that got me the most were Sleepaway Camp and The Empire Strikes Back. When I found out that Vader was Luke's father, I wanted to shit myself. I was like, there's no way. I felt like Luke. I was like, that's not possible. So those two really, really got me. So to have her would be like having, Harrison Ford. So that's been pretty exciting for me.
I'm not going to lie. Based on all the interviews I've seen of both, I think Felissa would be a better interviewee. Mm-hmm. Not going to lie.
Yeah, I'd be like, "Hey, Harrison, man, I loved you in Indiana Jones." And he'd be like, "I know.
Get off my plane.
Bastard. Don't Princess Leia me."
Yeah, he's kind of a little bit more of a curmudgeon as he gets older.
Cantankerous Jones.
However, though, has still been rocking that earring for I don't know how long, and has been in a solid relationship with Callista Flockhart, so I can't give the man a lot of hate.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, he's a genius, man. He's another one that, the thing I've always said about Harrison Ford is there are certain people that you look at and you put as a certain role. Like John Heder will always be Napoleon Dynamite to me. McLovin will always be McLovin to me. But Harrison Ford, when I look at him, I not only see Han Solo, but I really see Dr. Jones too. So it's one of those things where there are certain actors that, no matter how absolutely phenomenal they are, Johnny Depp will always be Edward Scissorhands to me. No matter how great he is, because Johnny Depp, I think, is one of the best character actors of all time. But Harrison Ford and Robin Williams are the two for me that don't stick out for just a single role. They are ones that, to me, have multiple roles that influence my life and the way I act as a human being today. So those two, I think, are my all-time, are the best actors. My favorite's Bill Murray, but that's a story for another day.
Well, and it's funny. Technically, we can talk Bill Murray, and we have talked Bill Murray in the Mouth of March Madness, actually, with Zombieland, but it's very rare that Harrison Ford or a Robin Williams show up in our show, at least on Nightmare Junkhead.
Right.
So it is always good to be able to talk and go into their worlds. But we're here to talk two films from 1991 that have kind of bitten and gnawed their way into the round of the Hateful Eight. We have Silence of the Lambs going up against People Under the Stairs. Now, what I'm curious here, Ken, of course, number one, which one should we talk first?
I would vote for let's talk about Silence first.
Would you talk about Silence with me? I'd talk about Silence with me.
So
I cut myself.
Yeah. Let me throw it out to you. What was your interaction with this movie? Because you're kind of in our age range here. So by any chance, did you see it in the theater, or do you remember your initial interaction with it?
I did not see it in the theater, and actually I did not see it until a little bit later. I was probably about 9 or 10 the first time I had seen it. And I always remember as a kid, I was not a huge Silence of the Lambs fan. I grew up with, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, House, these movies that were very over the top and gory and a lot of deaths. There wasn't a lot of psychological aspects to those that I grew up with. So to me, this was kind of a slow, boring movie. And so as a kid, didn't enjoy it as much. As an adult, I respect the performances in it. I don't like Jodie Foster's accent. I don't know what it is about it. I'm just not a fan. And look, I don't want to say this with sounding so weird, but would The Silence of the Lambs be considered a horror movie if it was released today?
There'd be the debate about it, but again, I'm going to stand firm by saying it is completely a horror movie. It's a cannibal serial killer versus another cannibal serial killer. And so by that definition alone, it's horror. I mean, it's gruesome and gory. And yeah, definitely if it was released today, it would still get the debate that it's getting today.
If it was put out today, it would probably be put out by
A24. Yeah.
A20, for sure. For sure. And I'm with you. I think The Silence of the Lambs is absolutely a horror movie. Even though you don't see a lot of death, you don't see, up until that ending, which is something we'll talk about once we dig a little deeper into this movie on how frustrated I get with the end of this film. You don't see very much death in this movie, but it's always talked about. And I love Buffalo Bill's performance in this movie, which is funny because I don't know if you guys remember, but FX had a show for a little bit called The Bridge. Did you guys check that out at all?
That was about the border between Mexico and U.S. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the guy that played Buffalo Bill, his name escapes me right now.
Ted Levine.
But he played the lead sheriff in that show. So to like watch him in that and then go back and rewatch him as, would you fuck me? I'd fuck me up. Like it's so weird.
That is exactly the same reason why I can't watch Monk. Like, because Ted Levine is the sergeant in Monk, and I'm just picturing Tony Shalhoub. The suspect was a great big fat person. Oh yeah, she's a great big fat person. Like I can't like unsee Ted Levine in anything. Even if he's in a fucking children's movie, he could be in like fucking The Wizards of Waverly Place, the movie, and I'll be like, whoa, watch out, Selena Gomez, he's gonna skin you, So it's like, he is, like we were talking about character actors. He is one of those guys that no matter what character he's playing, he's gonna be Buffalo Bill.
It's the voice alone. It takes you right back.
It puts the lotion in the
right back to that moment.
It's safe to say this movie has ruined probably certain character actors for a lot of people. It has ruined
or enhanced.
Lazarus Q. There are a number of things associated with this movie. So that being said, Ken, you kind of walk us through your journey because it sounds like a little trepidatious. Let's talk about Jodie Foster and her accent.
How did the lambs hurt you, Ken? How did the lambs hurt you?
Now I don't know what it is. Like I just feel like it's such a forced thing. Maybe it's because I'm older and I've seen her in so many other things. And like I said, if I had watched this movie more as a child, I think I would probably feel differently about it. But that's not to say I don't like this movie. I don't want it to come across like that. I'm one of those people. You guys know me. Mm-hmm. I will critique things, but I will never say this sucks or this is terrible. It's just not who I am. That's not my character. But in this movie, one of the big things for me is how scary it really is when you're trying to get to that climax. And one of the things that makes me so irritated about this movie is when we're talking about Buffalo Bill, he's got the night vision goggles on and he's following Jodie Foster. And this guy's a genius. Like, you can't deny it. He's a true genius. He's very intelligent. He's escaped the cops and the FBI for this long. But he cocks his gun so slow and pulls that hammer back like he's slamming it on the ground so she would know. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see how oh, man, that just really bothers me so bad to end him like that.
I'd like to think it was for the pizzazz, a little bit more of the showmanship, because
you're going to put on the show.
No, I agree, actually, that in fact the entirety of that ending, and I actually watched a video essay about Silence of the Lambs and the male gaze, but specifically, there are multiple shots in the movie where you get a forward camera view looking at Clarice, and it's always from like some sort of male authority figure. And I realized that then going back and rewatching, I'm like, oh yeah, it's like 4 or 5 times throughout the film, culminating in that last scene when you get him with that gear on, and it's just, I don't know if it's finally her unleashing on the male gaze finally at that point, but yeah, it's just that buildup is kind of incredible. No, it's one of those that's, Genius and I have been talking about it the entirety of the month. We both saw it in the theater at young, impressionable ages.
Very young, impressionable ages.
And it definitely threw us off a little bit, but I think the reason why I went in the theater is this is the movie, especially if you compare it to the movie we'll talk about eventually, is a movie you can still show the normies. How many people in your family, Ken, have actually seen, Silence of the Lambs?
Oh, it's everybody. My mom, God rest her soul, this was one of her favorite horror movies. Another movie that very much influenced me because of my mom was this one. When I think of my mom and I think of horror movies, she didn't like a lot. But the three ones that I remember my mom watching the most were this one, Flowers in the Attic, and you guys, anybody can argue with me that's not a horror, but that's 100% a horror movie.
Yeah, it is.
And the original Amityville Horror are the three horror movies that my mom enjoyed the most. And so I'll always have a soft spot for those three movies because of my mom. And even though this was probably at a young age, this was my least favorite of the three, because out of those three, this has the least amount of action and the least amount of scares. You know, because the little kid in Flowers in the Attic, dude, I'll send you guys a picture of me as a kid. It looked just like me, man. I had the blonde curly hair. Like, so when that kid died in the movie, I was like, oh shit. Like, they killed Kenny, those bastards. That's where it started for me, man. So, yeah, Flowers in the Attic was one, but this one to me was just a little bit slower as a kid. You know, you go into this, 4, 5, 6, like I said, compared to some of the other movies that we had watched at the time. It's not an action-packed movie, and a lot of this goes over your head at 4, 5, and 6 years old. So that's why, to me, I think this one didn't make the impact the other ones did.
Not only does it go over your head, but leaves you with a lot of questions. Or
your head literally in a jar, potentially.
Right.
No, completely. So, and again, it is definitely an adult-oriented movie. That's what I kind of really liked in 1991. There were quite a few films like that a lot of your teeny boppers aren't going to enjoy.
Yeah, and it also opened the floodgates to some of those like psychological horror movies, like The Hand That Rocks the Cradle and Single White Female and Misery and all that kind of stuff. It's like Silence of the Lambs, like, oh, we can be like classy and have horror without monsters and mayhem.
Yeah.
As much as I love monsters and mayhem, sometimes the scariest shit is the stuff that can really happen. It's that like real serial killer shit, and the fact that there might be Buffalo Bill, there might be Hannibal Lecter, and every day on the news you hear about more a string of murders and blah 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 blah. I mean, right now, honestly, both Hannibal Lecter and Buffalo Bill, if crimes were in the paper, it would start with a Florida man has, so like it totally can still work, and it's still terrifying.
Hannibal Lecter, though, that guy, and Anthony Hopkins, yeah, I'm psycho. Anthony Hopkins played him perfectly. He's a genius. And I'll always remember when someone talks about the Silence of the Lambs, the thing that I will always remember, because I didn't get it as a kid, when he is in the ambulance and he takes the face off. I was like, is there two of him? What? I didn't understand that that was so fucking cool, man. Sorry for the F word, but that was so awesome, man. When he took the face off when he's in the ambulance, like watching it back now, even the surprise on their face. Oh, dude, it's such a great scene. Such a great scene. It's, oh my God, I'm getting emotional thinking about it because it's so well done. Because you're wondering like how this is Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
This guy is so smart and he's so ingenious, and he killed himself on top of the elevator. No way. There's no way that happened. Did he fell? No. That didn't happen. Come on now. Did the elevator go up too high and crush him?
Squish him?
I don't know. But yeah, then you see him just sit up in that ambulance and take the face. Oh, dude, it's so great. Easily my favorite scene of the movie. Such a great moment.
Yeah, Hannibal Lecter ain't going to go out like no punk.
Right. He ain't going out on an elevator.
Right?
Well, and if you need any sequence of scenes that show that this is a horror film, the entirety of his breakout to that face reveal.
When they pull back and he's like crucified on the with his chest cavity opened up and shit. I was like, God damn, that's horrific. He looks like a violent dark angel Renaissance painting. Like how in but with guts and gore instead of like seraphim and cherubs. So I love it. And Kenny, don't worry about cussing. You've been on this fucking show before. So
I know, but I feel so rude when I do it on other people's shows, man. So I just feel bad when I do it.
It's all good. I try not to work blue just to balance everything.
And I can't help it.
Yeah, that's... Well, things that we can help are our feelings of the Silence of the Lambs. So final thoughts, Ken, before we transition into another adult-themed film.
I love the Silence of the Lambs. I think that, like you guys said, it really it started the horror thriller genre, the psychological horror thriller, which I feel is lazy sometimes. People that don't like horror movies are just be like, "That's a thriller, so I like it." But that's something that this movie really is your mix of horror thriller, and it's even got that true crime feeling to it as well. So that's another really good aspect of this movie. And before we get into the next movie, something I want to say about these two movies together. The People Under the Stairs is getting remade by Jordan Peele, and Clarice is getting its own TV show. So we're talking about which one of these movies is more impactful to this day, and that's such a hard question, but I want to go through a list real quick, and please don't misconstrue this as me smashing or knocking these movies, because I'm not. But here are some of the other movies that came out in 91 in the horror genre. Child's Play 3, Freddy's Dead, Sometimes They Come Back, The Pit and the Pendulum remake, The Howling 6, Puppet Master 3, The Omen 4, Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, and the Cape Fear remake. Now, those movies are all, like, Sometimes They Come Back is my favorite Stephen King adaptation. Child's Play 3 is my favorite Child's Play in the bunch. But the difference between those and The People Under the Stairs and Sounds of the Lambs is Silence and People Under the Stairs talk about real shit that's still going on today with, The People Under the Stairs with, the racism that goes along with that movie, and The Silence of the Lambs, with the transgender aspect of it. These are still things that we're talking about today that have a big impact on society. And I really think these two movies in that aspect were ahead of their time. These aren't just two slashers that were just out to have fun. They do have an underlying meaning to them, but they don't shove it in your face. They're a horror movie first, but they have that important message about, transgender, that they don't make it disrespectful and disgusting, and the underlying issues of racism and The People Under the Stairs. And I couldn't be more excited for the Jordan Peele remake of The People Under the Stairs.
Yeah, I think it definitely has legs, and it's still very relevant.
Sadly relevant, as it turns out. No, completely understood. Yeah, we'll get to, in fact, it's kind of funny. You almost took one of my arguments there, Ken, so I'm glad you zipped up a little on that. But no, let's go ahead and then talk People Under the Stairs by Wes Craven. Was this one that you were familiar with? What was your background with this particular film?
I did see this one in the cinema. I was very young. My uncle was always a big Wes Craven fan, and I seen this, and I seen Freddy's Dead in the theater. My uncle took me to see that one because it was in 3D, and that was the first 3D horror movie I ever seen in the theater as well. But The People Under the Stairs, I think for me, the funny thing about this is Brandon, the young boy fool. To me, he was always the pitcher from The Sandlot. Like that's who he was to me, and he plays this role so good. And Sean Whalen is Roach. This is one of those movies that, sure, there's the blood and the guts in this movie, like when he brings the torso up from down in the pit, or when they're doing the skinning alive and eating. But man, to me, the thing about this movie that is so powerful is just how scary those parents are.
Yes. Those parents are nuts. Fucking mom and daddy, mother and father.
Yep.
Yeah, no, they're...
Yeah. Like one scene with them, especially when the dad's running through the house with the shotgun and he's got like the bondage suit on, and he walks up and the daughter is chained up in the attic and he like starts grabbing himself, and it's almost like a rapey type scene.
Yeah.
And then the mom's like, "Daddy, get down here right now." And he's just like, "Aw." Like that scene is so scary to me, man. Like rewatching it now, like the anxiety I felt as a kid totally crept back up on me, because even as a kid, something really bad's about to happen at that scene. And something we talked about before, gentlemen, the dad was also the werewolf in Silver Bullet.
Oh yeah.
That dude has always scared the hell out of me.
Because he's always mid-transformation. That's fucking why. And of course you're scared at that whole like kind of weird rapey crotch-grabbing thing. Because even if he didn't have a shotgun, some guy looking at me in a gimp mask going, and grabbing his crotch, my heart rate is definitely going to be a little bit higher. So like, that's...
Is that bad that it's a normal Saturday night for me?
With the gimp mask?
That's right.
Sans the shotgun.
There's the other scene, and it's the implied violence where he's getting ready and he's grabbing the belt. And there's that whole thing of like,
feeding that thing in the walls again.
Bad girls go to hell. All of the the implications, as it turns out, are terrifying. And it just, but what's crazy though with the movie, and even upon rewatch, is, and I'll stand by this, how funny it is.
It's hilarious.
And even though I despise both of them, the physical acting from Everett McGill in this movie is next level.
And the mom, caca!
Yeah.
It's,
Even when he's looking, one thing that's always, even as a kid, it made me laugh. When he shoots out the mirror and he's yelling at the dog, he's like, "Get up!" And his whole body is shaking as he's screaming into this abyss. Like,
everything about him, it's terrifying, it's funny,
Yeah.
it's it made me feel not complicated because I wanted him to get his comeuppance, and then when the comeuppance happens, that's even better. Just that whole, I don't know how many times I've counted the gold, and just every little thing about him, man. It's just creepy, crawly.
It's disturbingly scary. Not only the fact that you have these like insane people chasing you, but the fact is like you're not even safe from walking around because a hand might come out of the wall, or like somebody might, because somebody grabbing you from the bottom of the stairs is a horror staple for a reason, because it's fucking scary. I don't trust those stairs with the no backing on them, and I can't, and it's just dark over there, because I know a deadeye's gonna grab me, or roach is gonna grab me, or something ill is gonna happen, and then eat you. God damn, this would make a good pairing with Lola from
The Loved Ones.
The Loved Ones.
Well, technically,
Yes.
that's what I love about both of these films, is they're both featuring cannibals. Like, this would make a great double feature in 1991, of which you probably could have caught at a drive-in. Where you
drive-in.
people under the stairs opening, and then Silence of the Lambs closing. Or would you open with silence and close with people?
You'd open with silence, because that's when the normies come. Come for the silence, stay for the people, and then you get them with the people. So like,
well, and that's just it. I said with silence, you can show it to the normies. People under the stairs, I know that some horror fans that do not like this movie, and that's what I think I love about it, is the fact that it is that off-kilter Craven. And the other thing that I love about these two films, and the weird connection, both of the directors made some very skeevy 70s films.
oh yeah, that's right.
Because Jonathan Demme had Caged Heat, which I did watch for the first time last year. And yes, it is a women in prison movie, but it's a very watchable women in prison movie.
Is it a classy women in a classy prison?
No, not at all. But
Okay.
Jonathan Demme definitely adds something to it, where you realize there's a talent there. And then, of course, with Craven Last House, and his pornographic material that he did indeed shoot. So that's what I love with these, and that the fact that here in the 90s, they're both still creating genre fare, some being a little bit more awarded than others, but still stuff that we are talking about to this day. And that's the beauty, I think, of the longevity of both of these movies.
Still lauded, still praised, and still impactful, still resonating with audiences to this day that are even seeing it for the first time. Because I'm sure now people, because of Clarice, they're going to backwards engineer and check out Silence of the Lambs. I'm sure with the announcement of Jordan Peele's remake, they're going to go back and check out People Under the Stairs, which is great, because I'm sure more people now are going to check out People Under the Stairs than when it originally showed.
Yeah.
So, and then again, like the fact that it's dealing with the systematic racism and distribution of wealth. It is dealing with incestuous themes. It's dealing with violence. It's dealing with gentrification. It's dealing with all these topics and subjects that we're not only still dealing with, but even fighting a bigger battle, because now we see how evil and deep this goes. So the fact that you have this
social
thing
media
30
breeds
years, and 30 years ago they were talking about it, and Wes Craven's like, you know what, I'm gonna take all these themes of horror living in the 90s and distill it into one house, and it fucking works still to this day. Horror themes of the 90s are still horror themes of the 20s.
I mean, shit, that shit happened in the 68 Romero Night of the Living Dead. Horror has always had a way of having social commentary to it without shoving it in your face.
Right. And even when it does shove in your face, it's usually at the end of a pickaxe or something. So,
well, that's, I think, why someone like Craven just is one of the masters, because I think there are a lot of people that'll watch this movie and they won't see 1 ounce of any of that. And they're not wrong, because you can watch this as a purely crazy, over-the-top, entertaining horror film. However, there are elements of it that, yes, you could probably write a dissertation about wealth inequality with a movie like this. And that's what Craven always did. He appealed to so many different people in such a cool way.
And the fact that you could probably film this as a weird kids in peril treasure hunt double feature with the Goonies.
Yeah, I'm still going with Deadly Games myself.
Yes.
I gotta go, but one thing before I lose my train of thought, the boy with the long hair in the cellar always terrified me, man.
He looked like Count Radu.
Oh, from Subspecies?
From Subspecies. He looked like the Subspecies vampire.
They all actually...
That kid always scared me, man.
It was the 80s metal hair, or the, transitioning. Yes. So thank God they didn't have any, like, Aquanet to really puff it up
Cellar
there.
Tufts?
Yes, Cellar
They
Tufts.
even got him on the back of the Blu-ray. And it's the first thing I seen when I got the Blu-ray.
Ken, by the way, here's your PTSD there, my friend.
Yeah, just sitting right here, because instantly stream and download TV, computer, tablet, smartphone, and you just see him
and nightmares
as he goes. So it's funny because when I do a movie, I'm still with it, buy the physical copy. I have the Silence of the Lambs here. I have the People Under the Stairs. I think that, like we were talking about before, these two movies were way ahead of their time, but still very, very entertaining and watchable in '91. They didn't need a Twitter hashtag to know that everybody was important then.
Yeah.
It wasn't something you said to be cool. And you didn't have social media letting you know how bad things were all over the place. And these guys were still on top of it. So horror has a way of opening your eyes to things that sometimes you don't really want to look at.
There it is. Horror finds a way.
Right? Well, hell, the world is scary enough, and who knows more about scary than, like, horror fans?
Absolutely. That's why we're best equipped to deal with it.
Yes, we are.
Now, as much as we love both of these films, only one can represent the year of 1991 in the Frightful Four. And here in the Round of the Hateful Eight, we do have two bits of criteria that we're going to look at when we show our work. And the first one is very abstract, and it's...
Closer. Oh, wrong one.
Not that. We're not there. We're beyond that, my friend. Relax your vocal cords. No, basically, I threw it out to everyone here to create kind of a definition or your own aesthetic of what horror was about in 1991, and then based on that definition or aesthetic, which of the two films then represents it more. So I'm going to throw it out here. Ken, would you like to go ahead and lead us off?
Yeah. When I got my list of the movies from 1991, the thing that I noticed the most was there were more slashers in 1991 than anything. Like I said, you had your Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, Freddy's Dead, Child's Play 3. You had these movies that were very slasher-esque. But I feel like at this point, with the Cape Fear remake, The Pit and the Pendulum, Silence of the Lambs, you really started the psychological horror in 1991. So we talked about which one is more important in 1991. And even though Silence of the Lambs and Cape Fear were really coming out and doing the psychological horror thing, I got to go with the People Under the Stairs. And the reason why I'm going with them being more important at that time was you still had that almost slasher-esque aspect to this movie. It wasn't an up-in-your-face slasher like a Michael Myers or a Freddy Krueger, but the dad, who's just known as dad and brother throughout the movie, he even puts on the mask, so to speak. He has his own, when he puts on the suit, and he has the shotgun, and even when he's eating at the beginning and he's spitting out the shells, the slugs, he is your stereotypical scary slasher guy. He's big. He's absolutely intimidating. You watch him, Leroy. You watch him cutting into Leroy and killing and eating Leroy. So when it comes to 1991, where I feel like slashers were still pretty dominant in cinema, I got to say People Under the Stairs for that reason was the more important in 1991 because it did have, it's Wes Craven, so you knew there was a slasher aspect to it. But to me, out of all the genre types, slasher would be the bottom of the list, but it's still on there. You don't get as much slasher. You get it implied in Silence more than you see it, but I feel like you see the slasher stuff in People more than you do Silence.
And that, my friends, is showing your work. Excellent work for first time here on Into the Mouth of March. Like a pro, my friend, like a pro. Genius.
So with coming up with an aesthetics of the 90s, I think Ken said something, you still have a lot of slashers and everything, but I also think that's the tail end of the 80s still seeping in. I think when it comes to the 90s, especially from what we've seen, we've almost gone starting a complete opposite, because the 80s were big and loud and bombastic and otherworldly and creatures that couldn't die and like aliens coming out of nowhere. And we still get that in the 90s, but starting with Silence of the Lambs, starting with Cape Fear, starting with all these things, you see this shift of going from the phantasmic and the otherworldly to the more grounded in realism, the more scary, the more, because after that you get the birth of the procedurals, you get this, you get that, you get all these cop shows, you get all these different things that are dealing with non-supernatural slashers. And yeah, the Silence of the People Under the Stairs had non-supernatural slashers as well, but they didn't turn people into cannibals.
Right.
So for what the aesthetics of the 90s is, I'm thinking dark and realistic. And with that, I got to go with Silence of the Lambs for creating the outlook of what it is.
Your work has been shown.
I like your reasoning, but I hate your choice.
Well, and it's funny then, because the first thing, Ken, when you started listing all those sequels, my whole thing is there are at least 13 sequels in the year of 1991. Yeah. Which shows that there are 13 horror franchises that are trying to expand their fright well into the 1990s. So I had to go, for me, my aesthetic is sequelitis. It's we're in the year of the sequels. And don't get me wrong, I would love to see the further adventures of Fool. You know, we've talked about, I think, throughout. But technically
that is
Silence of the Lambs is a sequel. Because a few years before, Michael Mann had Manhunter, it doesn't necessarily follow into it, but it does follow it in the sequence of the books. This is also technically part of a franchise, as we have Red Dragon, we've got Hannibal Rising, and all of those, and we didn't get to go beyond the first people, which is a bummer, because like I said, I'd gladly continue that exploration. But
more People Under the Stairs.
Yeah. No, we'll scale it down to a person under the stair at this point. But based on that and the idea that Silence is a sequel, it has launched a franchise. And if I'm saying sequelitis with my aesthetic, my vote does go to Silence of the Lambs. Now, that being said, though, here, we are talking about a movie now where we've been giving a lot of love to both of these films 30 years from their release date. So my question now is, which one are we still talking about 30 years later when we're in the retirement home talking about the good old days, whether we're potting from our beds, what have you, but which of the two are we talking 30 years later? Ken, let me start with you.
I got to go People, man. Look, now one thing where I will disagree with you, I am beyond excited they did not continue this franchise. I'm glad it died with Mom and Dad, because I don't think you could get another villain couple like that. There are certain films that I wish would be standalone. The Ring being a big one I talk about a lot. Yeah. I wish that would have stayed as a standalone film. And I'm glad that I'm not including the People Under the Stairs in that subject, because I feel this is a great movie where the villains are dead. They are not, like you said, there's no supernatural aspect to them. They're just bad people doing bad things, and they got their comeuppance. They're dead. End the story there. Let's have a happy ending for Fool. Let's not give him any more. He already, the shit with his mom, and he's already had it bad enough. So, but when we're talking about which one are we still talking about 30 years later, it's hard because they're both so impactful. And like I said, you're going to be getting the remake of The People Under the Stairs. Clarice, I believe, is coming sooner. It may already have aired, the TV series. And like you said, they had everybody knows the Silence of the Lambs, man. Even, Jim Carrey and the Cable Guy, Silence of the Lambs, with the turkey skin. And, Hannibal Lecter is a well-known name. It's almost a household name. People know the name Hannibal Lecter. Candy. Like Dumb and Dumber, man. Like all these things that even outside of the horror world, that apparently Jim Carrey just has an obsession with Silence of the Lambs. I just put two and two together with Cable Guy and Dumb and Dumber.
Right. There you go.
It's hard even though I won't say what I want to say. I'll get to that when we get to the end. But I would have to say, which one are we talking about more 30 years later? I got to go Silence of the Lambs. Just because it had the more sequels. You got the TV show that's already aired or about to air. So it's got that, the ball's rolling more at this moment on the Silence of the Lambs.
Excellent choice. Genius.
I think we're going to be talking about Silence of the Lambs for two reasons. Although we should be talking about one, and we will still be talking about actually both of them 30 years down the line, because I think People Under the Stairs has tapped into something that's not going to go away anytime soon. We're still going to have improper distribution of wealth. We're still going to have systematic racism. We're still going to have all these terrible things that it addresses. However, people didn't even talk about People Under the Stairs when it was first came out. You know, it's still one of those underseen Craven classics. It's one of his better movies. But that, Shocker, a couple of other great ones. This is prime Craven, but nobody's seen it. I mean, we've seen it. We're horror fans. People listening who have seen this is horror fans. But I think that's one reason why Silence is going to go, because nobody talked about it at the beginning. But another reason why Silence should go is because that is the movie that normies can see. That is the movie that won so many awards. That is the movie with academic think pieces. That is also the one with all the spin-offs and sequels and multiple iterations. So even if it wasn't as like forthcoming, a harbinger of things to come when it comes to true crime and realistic things, it would still be talked about because of all the characters and spin-offs ad nauseum. So I think for that reason, we're still going to be talking about both. But more people are going to be talking about Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And I'm going to piggyback off that because I do think 30 years from now, they will still be talking Silence of the Lambs. And again, the normies. And I think it's up to us that we should still be talking about People Under the Stairs 30 years later, because I'm hoping, Genius, ideally, that there's not the systematic racism right now. I'm hoping this becomes a cautionary tale rather than a prescient tale.
Yes.
You know, and I'm hoping 30 years from now we can go, oh my God, do you remember how bad that was, you know, at that time? Versus everyone's still going to talk. We're still going to talk Silence. I mean, good God, when we are in the nursing home, when Goodbye Horses comes up,
I fuck me so hard.
You're going to bust a hip trying to get up there to do something illicit, guaranteed.
Sir, it's time for your medical rub down. Where should we put the lotion? Put the lotion in the basket, right? Just like
he's gonna be yelling. He's gonna be yelling to you in the other room, trying to make you swallow your tongue.
Oh God, please tell me you are not, bunked next to multiple MIGs. But by a count of 4-2, making its way into the round of the Frightful Four. Silence of the Lambs in the year of 1991. I'm not going to lie. I was pulling for the people, but I'm good with Silence.
Silence had mine going all the way to the top of the bracket.
So I do got to say what I was going to say earlier that I said I'd say towards the end. If we're talking about which movie we prefer, I'm going People Under the Stairs.
Yep.
I prefer People Under the Stairs to Silence of the Lambs. I think it's the better film. But man, it's just Silence is, and this is just personal preference. Silence of the Lambs is still great. If one of them's on, I'm going to sit and watch it. I prefer People Under the Stairs, but The Silence of the Lambs is such a good movie. The performances are great, besides some accents, and it's just it's going to stand the test of time, because no matter what, you're always going to have crazy people out there.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
You know, like, even though, God willing, someday we can finally see that no matter what color the skin is, the blood is still red. Hopefully we can get to that point someday where we don't judge people by that. We don't live in that type of ignorance anymore. You're still always going to have people that are mentally unstable, and they could be the biggest genius in the world, no pun intended, but they could, it's just one of those things where I think Silence is, it's one of those films that will always be in the annals of history. Always. Like you said, it won awards, and that's unheard of for horror movies to win awards.
Well,
no matter how great the movie or the performances are, it just doesn't happen.
Well, who knows if it is going to possibly win the award of Into the Mouth of March Madness winner of the year of 2021. But we could not have gotten here without our good friend Kent. So sincerely, man, thank you for coming in on the madness with us. Now,
would you subscribe to his channel? I'd subscribe to his channel. I subscribe so hard.
And if you were going to subscribe to that channel, where can they find you again, Ken?
Now I'm stuck thinking I'd subscribe hard. Someone smashing the subscribe button.
Like. It puts the likes in the basket.
It puts the thumbs up.
Was it a great big fat stream?
So youtube.com/Sledgehammer Horror, Instagram @Sledgehammer Horror, Facebook @Sledgehammer Horror, and Twitter @Sledgehammer HOR.
Excellent, excellent. Well, from the year of 1991, here next week, we're going to the new millennium. We hopefully will get by all the doomsday stuff, Y2K, and we're going to see which of the 8 films from the year of 2001 will be joining Silence of the Lambs in the round of the Frightful Four.
It's going to be fun.
So until that time, this is Greg D.
I'm Genius McGee.
And we'll see you in your dreams.
Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.